Okay, I think I'm hearing from Peter that we should get started. Peter, I see that you're muted, but I've got your chat here that says that the internet seems to come and go and that you're wanting to get started. So I think we'll get started. Peter, I'm not totally sure how to mute and unmute people, so I'm hoping that you'll take care of that. And I know you don't have a visual, I don't have a visual of you, so I can't tell whether you're understanding that or hearing that or not, but I'm going to get moving here and we'll see how we can go. Those of you who are on video, can you just wave at me to say that you hear what I'm saying and we're all good? Wonderful. This is good affirmation. Okay, I'm feeling better about this. Peter, do you want to unmute for a second and maybe we could do introductions again just to kind of remind people of who we all are and where we're from? I'm Buita from snowy Winnipeg, and it really is busy out there today. We've got a massive snowstorm that came through last night, and but crazy people that we are, we have made it into the office. I don't know whether I'll make it home or not, but yeah, it's good to be connecting with you all again. Who else wants to introduce themselves again and remind me where you're from?
Well, I'll go. I'm Lori Riley and Smiths Falls.
Oh, great. That's Ontario, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm Dina Heptich from North Street, Bermuda, North Street Citadel.
Oh,
we got a
there.
stormy day here too, but it's not snow. It's just wind and rain and high tides. So
yeah,
it's a storm advisory.
Okay.
Hi, Dina. How's your foot?
Good. I'm hopping along.
Okay.
Pretty good. Thanks.
Who else do we have?
I'm Elizabeth Knight from St. George's, Bermuda.
Okay, another warm one.
On Halsey from Scarborough Citadel.
Okay, good to have you.
Abby Mills from Belleville, Ontario.
Okay, great. And then I'm assuming we've got some people that are on the phone or they're on. Sorry, I'm flipping the screen here. I was trying to get my chat button, but I don't know how to do that. Peter, is there anybody else that we should introduce? I don't know if
Mel Walter LeBlanc is my intake worker. She's online from home, but doesn't have audio or video.
Okay. And I lost my little tab at the top that has the chat button on it. So, oh, there we go. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, well, welcome to everybody. Anyway, it's good to connect with you all again. Glad to have you part of the conversation and hoping to have a great conversation today again, kind of building on what we chatted about a month. It's hard to believe it's been a month that's gone by already. Some objectives for today. We are going to talk about the significance of working with assets in community development. So last week we talked a little bit more about relationship building kinds of things. Am I muted or can you guys hear me still? Wave if you can hear me. Good. Okay. So we're working on assets. That's the John McKnight piece that we talked about. That's part of the readings. We're going to talk about the role of connectors, in part because I see that as being a strong piece of the work that you guys do in the congregations and the social service divisions that you're with. And then we're going to touch a little bit on Paul Bourne's book, Community Conversations, and that kind of gets us into a bit more of that skill building kind of piece in terms of what does it actually mean to kind of do the work of building connections, having those conversations that are going to be meaningful and move towards change in our communities. And then hopefully a bit of conversation with you guys to kind of think about what that looks like in the community that you're involved in. Any questions at this point in time? We're all good? Yep. Okay. All right, let's keep on trucking then. So what I want to start with then is a bit of a review of last week. And here I want to have a bit of a conversation. So if we can unmute again, that would be great. But I want you to think about one thing that stuck out for you from last month's session, something that you've kind of thought about, that's kind of stuck in your head that you can't get rid of, or something that you've done differently based on our conversation or the readings from the Deepening Community. And a reminder again, with Deepening Community, we were talking about those different pieces that we can do to build engagement with those around us. That by building engagement, we're developing a sense of trust with each other. By increasing our trust, we have a circle of support that's larger. We have opportunities for enjoyment with each other that create places for us to just have fun with each other. When we have fun with each other, then we're more likely to share our gifts with each other. We're more likely to rely on each other. When we have those opportunities to share our gifts, it increases our sense of self-efficacy and self-esteem. And through all of that kind of engagement, that ability to deepen that sense of relationship with each other, together we can come together and make a difference. So that was a quick review, but tell me what you're thinking. What stuck out for you? Any thoughts?
Well, I wasn't here the last one, but and I'm new to Smiths Falls. But one thing that stuck out, we have Pee Wee Bears, and they were in the Good Deeds Cup. So I developed a relationship with the Pee Wee Bears because we are their choice of, you know, to donate their money to. Anyway, so I had to jump in with all these hockey moms who are extremely organized.
Yeah.
And there was this quick bond, like really quick. And I was helping them, they were helping us. And then when Gary's dad passed away, they all sent me like hugs and prayers. So developing trust can be quick or it can take a while.
Yeah. And that sense of what comes out of it, right? That sense of support. So they were supporting you in a time of your need as well, right? Yeah.
And that they've, you know, raised enough money to send all of our kids to camp.
Wonderful. That's great. How about others? What else stood out for you? I think we've got a chat here. So I've got a comment here that says the shared program, hockey makes community easier. Yeah. I was a hockey mom at one point in time, and I know that that there is definitely a sense of community amongst hockey parents, and that when they can get involved in the broader and larger community too, making those connections between associations. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, but that can be a really significant thing. How about others? What else stuck out for you? What are those ways in your communities where you're finding opportunities to help engage with people, to help people to find ways to engage with each other, so that it's not always just through you, but it's also you creating a space where the members in your community are able to connect with each other and build that sense of support with each other? Any examples of that?
We've made a connection with one of the local hubs, which in Toronto, called neighborhood improvement areas now, and they have a hub which has one overall agency that looks after it and a bunch of other agencies, so people only need to go to one location. And one of our staff made a connection there to possibly do Red Cap for kids. And through that, we were able to get some support to partner to do English conversation circles. So we're hoping to start that up in the next couple of weeks.
Wow, yeah.
Sharing some space. They have some space, we have some space, but we want to make it as easy for the residents as possible to go to the closer location.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so again, seeing those opportunities for associations and organizations to connect with each other and to support each other in the work that you're doing, so that you can kind of create those easier ways for people to connect, right? Yeah. Other thoughts? What else are you doing that kind of fits with the deepening community piece?
Well, I think talking about what you noticed, I think we talked about that, issues that may be coming to the forefront more and more, and getting together with other community groups to discuss what they see going on, and what would be a possible effort on all parts to sort of address what's going on.
Yeah.
So we've done that. I sat in on a homelessness meeting that had people who are living in social housing as part of the meeting. And so we were discussing how there seemed to be a lot of people lately who were being kicked out of their rental unit.
Okay.
And we had a legal aid person there. And so we were like kind of asking questions. What do you think's going on? And what can we do to react and help in this situation together? So
That's great. That's wonderful. Okay, so lots of stuff going on, and this is really great. And all of the things that you're talking about kind of feed into what we're going to be talking about today as well. I'm going to keep us moving forward. I have one more comment here first, I think. Yes, keep digging. This is good. Okay. Care is the freely given commitment from the heart of one to another. No system can mandate, manage, produce, or provide this kind of care. And one of the quiet tragedies of the 20th century is that we have accepted the idea that institutions rather than families, neighbors, and associations are the primary sites of care. This mistaken understanding is the cause rather than the solution of many of our social problems. So this is a quote that I posted on Facebook earlier in the week, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. So how do you relate to this quote in those somebody's got a phone going there, in these communities where you work and live? So does this quote speak to you? For me as a social worker, part of my role is to be a part of the system, to be a part of that mandated group of people who are entering into people's lives to provide care. But we often tell our students that ultimately we want you to work yourself out of a job. We don't want to be the system coming in to fix things. We want people to have the resources and the ability and the gifts and the talents and the support that they need to be able to help themselves. But what do you guys think about this? What do you see in your neighborhoods? What do you think about the role of the Salvation Army in this? Do you see yourselves as kind of continuing to provide care, or do you see yourselves as kind of doing that work to build people up to kind of create those places where people can help each other? Yeah, go ahead on.
Yeah, the whole idea of a food bank and what is the point of this? Like the whole idea of food banks to begin with was an emergency place for emergencies. But with the cut in the OW rates a few years ago, and people just end up relying on us, and we just feel overwhelmed with the numbers that we're seeing as well. The same people month after month. We try and build community by spending time, and this is something I tell students that are here. Don't worry about the people in the waiting room. Worry about the person that's in front of you, and try and connect at least on one thing that's happening in their lives, and try and make a note of that so we can follow up in the following month. This might be the only place where they feel some sort of community connection.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that care and that empathy that you provide is absolutely foundational and important. Yeah. But if that's the only place that they're getting care from, what else can we be doing? What are the challenges and the difficulties with that? Yeah.
Well, again, that comes down to how much time do you have available, resources. We certainly help with kids at camp. Spending camp, I run a couple of weeks of camp for kids. And you try and make connections to the core, and we're doing a little bit better job of that by having someone sit in as in the chaplain role, the waiting room. But it's difficult. Also, the distance is a lot of people. Huge catchment area, and for TDC, you're talking about $650 for a round trip for somebody with very limited income.
Yeah. Those are significant issues. How about others?
Run.
Are there other thoughts or comments on this quote? What stands out for you? I think we've got somebody there that's not got a question. Okay, I'm going to move us forward to the next slide. Let's mute for a second, and if we, so commitment of from one heart to another, that a system can't do the same kind of thing. And I think, you know, congregational work or the work of the church in providing social services and things like that, I think we do try to put our heart into it. I think that's where faith-based social services bring something to the table that regular public social services don't have that quite the same ability to touch on, that because we are doing it from our hearts. We are doing that motivated by that willingness to live out our Christian convictions, which include that that sense of that need to care for one another. No can mandate, manage, or produce this kind of care. So when we end up relying on systems to do this work, then we end up in a place where we've got really needy individuals who are, in terms of getting their needs met, are really only relying on professionals who are paid to do this work, as opposed to having community members, family members, people that love them, providing that support to them. And so what we can do then as community development people is to try and create those places where people have those opportunities to engage with each other, so that they don't just need to have a service provided by a professional, but that they have people in their lives that they can turn to that can help them and that can support them. Okay, so this quote is from John McKnight, and he's one of the developers of that asset-based community development. And if you have a chance to go on that website, they've got some really great materials on there. When he talks about assets and what those means, he is looking at the lives of the early settlers, and the fact that when early settlers came to North America, they didn't have professionals to rely on. They had to rely on each other. And so together they developed associations, collections of people banding together to help each other in order to be able to survive. And somehow we've kind of lost this sense of our own awareness of our own skills and gifts and abilities. Here we go. So one of the challenges when we think about community is that often we end up identifying our communities by their problems instead of by their assets. You know, so we think about in Winnipeg, it's the North End, right? The North End is that part of town that you wouldn't want to live in, that there is problems with vandalism, problems with crime, problems with safety, all of those kinds of things. And when you identify a community by its problems, then you kind of set that community up. I'm wondering whether you have experience with that in your communities, whether you've had communities that are defined by their problems and how that is a challenge for them, and what happens when you shift to talking about gifts or abilities or talents. Has anybody had experiences with that kind of thing? Maybe we can unmute again for a minute. Have you had times in your communities where you've been surprised by gifts in good ways with the people that you work with, and seen that shift?
No, I think we already hear her.
Okay, we're a little quiet this morning. Yeah.
I'm new to all of this, so I apologize for not having much to say.
That's okay. What are your thoughts? Have you had experience in terms of having people label your community as a problem as opposed to something beneficial or the gift that the community has?
Oh yeah, the whole area that I live in is labeled fairly negatively.
Mm-hmm. And what do you see coming out of that? What do you see in terms of how others relate to the community?
I don't know.
easy to
Like
see.
outsiders or the people within looking at themselves?
Yeah, I think both are good questions, because I think sometimes outsiders will label the community and avoid it.
Yeah.
But I'm also interested in what you see in terms of the individuals that are living in that community, what it is to them to feel labeled.
I think it oppresses them, like it keeps them
Mm-hmm.
community because they're all in it together. So you kind of see a community
Mm-hmm.
in that negativity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And the things that I've seen at our Salvation Army in Wyerton is that
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the people really respond in a positive way when the Cohort creates environments for them to come together,
Mm-hmm.
and they can be proud of the things they're accomplishing.
Yeah.
Building up. I don't know.
So yeah, no, you were absolutely going where I'm hoping that this will go. So when you have those opportunities to have your community members who come from a depressed or an oppressed community, where they're seen as problematic or at risk or whatever, but when they have that opportunity to come together and work together on something, you talked about pride. What does that pride do for them? Do you see things kind of happen after that?
Yeah, you almost see a bounce in their step and some purpose given to their day or their life or some value.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, just other than it's just a positive feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. How about others? Does anybody else have any experience with that kind of thing happening, where you're working in a community that's been identified by its problems, but there's been an experience where you've been able to kind of see a chance for the gifts and talents and abilities of that community to be used in a positive way?
Well, I had an experience last year. It was our first year here and our first time that we were doing the Christmas hamper distribution in St. George's.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the gentlemen that was receiving a hamper came with all kinds of fresh herbs that he had grown in his garden. And so he was giving them out to the volunteers, and he was giving them out to the, to some of the people that were there. And I don't think I really thought of it that much at that time, but now I see that as, a gift, as something he was sharing, as is that an asset to tap into. So I'm just because of some of the readings, I'm even seeing that in a different way. But just that idea of he came to receive, but he also came to give. Yeah,
that's wonderful. That's great. Yeah. So when Kretzmann and McKnight talk about assets, and I'm going to maybe close us, let's mute for a second here again, and I'll just chat for a little bit. So Kretzmann and McKnight, they talk, well, McKnight especially, Kretzmann I think has passed away, but they talk about that challenge of professional social service agencies coming in and fixing individual problems, and the families end up becoming more connected to more and more professionals who are serving them, and they kind of end up having their own power and their own strength, their own gifts and abilities just kind of get pushed down rather than being used. In a healthy community, we see individuals and families who are able to draw on the strengths and gifts and abilities of others in their community to help them get through those rough patches. And when I say this, I don't say this in the sense that I don't think there should be any social services. Social services are absolutely important, and I don't want to get rid of them, but I want to speak to the importance of us creating those communities for ourselves that we can rely on. And when I think about church in itself, church as community is, that's where your needs get met. That's where you get your support. That's where you have people that you can rely on in times of struggle and times of need. So when McKnight talks about the power of our gifts, he talks about the fact that with these gifts that we are able to begin to take responsibility for our families and communities and feel support from those around us. And that responsibility, we also have that chance to feel supported, to give support and to feel supported. And so, Laura, you were talking about that bounce in the step that people have when they're able to kind of do something for others. That sense of altruism, it's significant and it's important. We build new connections and new relationships, so that opportunity to kind of connect with people that we hadn't known before. That sense that, well, I maybe didn't know who I could turn to get my plumbing done, but I have a connection with somebody else who knows a plumber. And so we build those connections. We make new relationships that end up strengthening us. And we realize together that even without money, we can do much. And, as a church, that, right? There's lots that you can do. You don't have big budgets, but there's still lots that you can do when you come together to work at it. The power of our gifts builds trust, which brings security. So the more that we know our neighbors, the more that we know the people around us, the safer that we feel. And it's this positive cycle, right? The more connected we feel, the more willing we feel to kind of share our own gifts, and it becomes that positive cycle. And out of that, we begin to feel powerful. We can do something. We've, gained some trust with each other. We've done some work together. We feel powerful. We've been able to address something. So the hockey moms who were able to kind of raise that money to give to the Salvation Army, that meant that these kids could go to camp. That's a sense of power. That's a ability to get something. And when we have those opportunities, those chances to feel powerful, we can celebrate. We have those opportunities again, like Paul Bourne was talking about, those chances to celebrate, to enjoy each other, to have fun together, to acclaim our success. And the more success you have, the more willing you are to kind of stretch yourself to do something further, to kind of try something else that's new. We had a good opportunity for success here. That means that I am more likely to try again and move further. And then through all of that, we create a sense of history together. And with that shared history comes that sense of connection and that willingness to kind of step into each other's lives. I think in our world today, individualism has been at the forefront for so long for us, and I think it's important for us to kind of come back and think about family and think about community and relationships, and that we are not on an island all alone. We live in community, and we need to rely on each other. We are each other's keepers, and that's not a bad thing, that we need to kind of be able to be there for each other. Cressman and McKnight move on to talk about associations. And so they talk about the fact that in early America, you've got these individuals who can't do it all on their own, and they come together, like-minded individuals who come together to get the work that needs to get done, to get it done. So when we think about associations have that power to decide what needs to be done. They're the ones that know what needs doing in the community. So I'm thinking of that homelessness association. I'm forgetting who was talking about that, but that was a bunch of people, and it sounded like associations. It sounded like there were individuals affected by homelessness, which was important to have that voice, but also other associations and organizations that are working on that issue and bringing people together to identify what needs to be done in the community. Associations coming together can decide how to do what needs to be done in the community. So it's not just what needs to be done, it's also figuring out how are we going to address that? What are we going to do to kind of get at that issue? And we know as well that, outside experts coming in and telling you what needs to be done, the chances of that taking hold and working well is more limited. We know that local knowledge is the basic expertise. So when we can rely on the gifts and the skills and the knowledge and the abilities of the people that are living in that community to decide what needs to be done, to decide how to do what needs to be done, then that's creating a thing that is more likelihood of success, rather than having the external expert come in and tell you what needs to be done. The other power of our associations is to join with neighbors to actually do what needs to be done. And when we move forward into talking about Paul Bourne's stuff, he's going to get into a little bit more of the how we gather together to figure these pieces out. How do we have those conversations to decide these things about what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and then creating that engagement. When you've had good levels of engagement, community engagement, deepening community, when you have people that are committed, who know each other and are committed to each other, then they're more willing to join with others to actually do what needs to be done. Any questions on this so far? We're all okay? So the piece that McKnight talks about that I think is key to the role that that you guys with Salvation Army congregations and the social services, the community programs that you run, the role that I see as important for you guys is that vital role of connectors. So connectors are gift-centered people who are willing and able to identify the gift in the people that walk through your doors. So if you think about the community members that are coming in, perhaps they're coming to seek services from you, but you're not just seeing their needs, you're also seeing their gifts. One of the things that I wanted to talk about as well was that McKnight, and he doesn't talk about it in this article, but he talks about it elsewhere. He talks about identifying the gifts that people have, and that when you look at gifts, it's important to look at gifts of the head. So gifts of knowledge that people have that can be shared. Think about what you know, think about what you can teach. You may know a lot about music and you might be able to teach piano lessons. You might know a lot about finances. This is the time of year when taxes need to get done. So you might know and be able to help people do their taxes. You might know about parenting and can help with that kind of thing. So what are those knowledge pieces that the members of your community have that they could share with others? Think about the hands. What are those things, those gifts that you have that you can do to knit, to paint, to woodwork, to babysit, to coach or to ref, plumbing. There's all kinds of things that we can do with our hands, and making a comprehensive list, helping people in your community to identify the gifts of the hands that can be shared. And then the gifts of the heart. So we've got the head, the hands, and the heart to think about gifts. So sharing your passion, your compassion for other people, caring for other people, your intensity, your energy. Think about the relationships that you have. Think about the dreams and desires that you have and how that can be a gift to be shared. One of the activities that we do in my community development class is to make a list and have everybody in the class identify 2 or 3 gifts that they have that they would be willing to share in these categories of heart, hands, and head. And then after we've done that, we get them to kind of put the list together. And then we get them to make a separate list, and we put these up on the wall with sticky notes and things like that. And we make a list as well of things that you would like to learn, or things that you need help with, things that you can't do on your own that you would need to seek help from other people for. And then we kind of look at those 2 lists together and see how people, what is there on one list of things that we need help with, and what are the people and the gifts on the other list that can be used to help that. So that's just an example of an interesting way to kind of get at some of those gifts and help people to realize that there's so much that people have that they can offer, and so many ways to kind of have that. So then the role that you play then is to help people identify those gifts and to help those with the gifts provide that and share that with others around them. So the vital role of connectors then, people who can identify gifts, people are connected and active in the community. And so I know that that's all of you folk, that you know your community well, you know the other service providers, you know the other important stakeholders in the community, and can make those connections with people. We're also looking for people who are trusted by others. So it's not just a matter of knowing who to know, but it's also that sense that you've had enough. Sometimes it's about time and longevity in a community. Sometimes it's also about just having that chance to build relationships with others where you are trusted by others, so that when you're playing that role of a connector and you're connecting one community member with another community member, that they can trust that that's going to be a good fit and a good connection for them. Connectors are people who believe in the people of their community. These are people who who don't see the glass as half empty. You see it as half full. You don't see the community just as that place of need and harm and risk, but you see that place of community that is growing, that is thriving, where you've gotten to know your community members well enough to know what assets there are, that you believe that they have something to offer, and people need to be believed in. So that's an important aspect as well. There we go. And then the other piece that he talked about is that connectors are people who get joy from connecting. So that this is, this is part of your lived experience. You're living out of the gospel, that you get that sense of joy from connecting those with some challenges and some struggles with those who can help, those who can have something to offer. And making those connections is something that gives you joy, that makes you feel good as well. Okay. So that kind of brings us then, when I'm thinking of this connectors table, I'm thinking of the work that Paul Bourne talked about in his Community Conversations book, where he's talking about how the connectors table in my mind is that space that Paul Bourne creates, where he's got stakeholders who come together to talk about what's going on in the community and how can we bring this community to a better place. And he talks about some building blocks to those conversations. So the first one that he talks about, and I'm still hoping that we're going to get some time for conversation here yet, but I want to bring us to at least some of the basics of what Bourne has described in his book. And I'm going to go through probably the first couple of chapters, but just in real brief. The second half of the book really gives you some examples of the ideas and the themes that he's talking about. So conversing, his first book talked about engagement, creating those opportunities for relationship and building a relationship. Here he's talking about conversing as a tool, creating a space for both dialogue and listening. One of the things that he talked about was listen with an exclamation mark, and he kind of alluded to one of his teachers telling him to listen with empathy. And active listening, that's something that we teach our students as well. But what I liked was his emphasis on listening to gain a corner on the obvious. So listening so that you're able to enter in and understand things from the other person's perspective, to gain a corner on what's obvious to them. It may not be obvious to you, but what is it that's obvious to them, and how do you understand their perspective on things? So you're listening not just to hear, but you're listening to understand as well. And this is a part of what dialogue is about. So dialogue, that sense of meaning and flow that you have together as you talk. So it's that opportunity to engage in meaning making. So together we are coming up with a shared understanding of what's going on. And when you're the person in power, that means that you're supposed to make sure that you take extra care to understand what it's like for that person who might be marginalized, that person who has less power. But it's about engaging in the meaning that another person brings to the table, that we're suspending our assumptions and willingness to step into that meaning that the other person brings. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump there. So we're kind of owning our own assumptions, but kind of taking a step back from that and recognizing that we need to see things from the perspective of the other. So when we have good dialogue and good conversation, that can lead to engagement. And engagement is what we need to move towards action. Expectations will follow from engagement. So we're building on trust in our listening and conversations, and this is the foundation for our work together. And that when we have these conversations and we are engaged in the issue, that expectation then is that we're going to be willing to do something about it because we are engaged in it, because we have bought in, that we've listened to the other side, that we've shared our meaning together, and that produces the foundation for actually doing something about it. Bourne talks about single sector versus multi-sector engagement. And so thinking about when you have multi-sector engagement involving businesses, government, volunteer groups, that's looking at the profit world. Businesses can have lots, they often want to partner and have lots that they can offer. The government, which is usually providing social services to those at-risk groups, and those volunteer groups, those associations, that when you can come together, looking at those multiple sectors, that you end up with a little bit more power to address the issues that are going on, broadens your ability to identify the challenge, to understand each other, and to work towards change. And always you want to make sure that you're bringing together the unusual suspects. So often we have our kind of go-to list of people that we think we should bring in and involve. But think about bringing together people who are on the margins, the strangers, the people who you might not have realized were interested in this kind of an issue or this kind of a topic. And that brings us back again to that sense of being open to conversations, because in being open to conversations, you might find yourself realizing that, oh, I didn't know that you were interested in this issue. But if you don't have the conversations, you're not going to find that out. Talk is about the role of power, and it's important to be aware of that. So ensure that you enhance the power of those who are affected by the issue. That that you recognize that if you are bringing in multi-sector involvement with people who are volunteers, people from business, people from government, those people from business and government are going to carry a lot of weight and going to carry a lot of power. And to make sure that you've had good conversations about how to set ground rules for your conversations that address issues of power, and ensure that those that are most affected by the issue, the vulnerable, the marginalized, have a way that's good to get their voice heard, and in a way that will benefit them. The last thing he talks about in terms of engagement is that sense of relying on human goodness. So instead of thinking about things in the negative, the glass is half empty instead of half full, think about who is it that cares. So don't think about what's wrong and how to fix it. Think about who cares and what's possible. When you talk in terms of who cares, that's when you kind of address and identify those stakeholders who are going to be key in moving forward on an issue. And when you think about what is possible, you open things up rather than closing down options. So it allows you to end up being more creative in terms of how you move forward with an issue. Okay. Collaborating then is the next chapter that he talks about. And so you begin with conversations. The conversations flow into engagement with each other, where there's a space for created collaboration. There's a space that's created for collaboration where you can work together towards a shared vision. And Bourne talks about 5 different phases in terms of working to address complex community issues. He's got a nice diagram, but I didn't put that on here. And these 5 phases are really kind of the development of an association or an organization that's built to work with a particular issue. And so as Salvation Army folk in the community there, you might be a key stakeholder leading a process, or you might be just one of the stakeholders that's kind of involved in this and a partner with this. But when you collaborate together, when you work together to create a bit of an organization around this issue, what the first piece that Bourne talks about is the phase of vision that emerges through conversation. So what is it that you want to change? What is it that you're reaching towards? What's that challenge that you want to address? What is it that you want? What is it that you care about? And how can you envision making things different related to that? As you develop your vision, as you have those conversations, you're going to build community will. You're going to reach out to others who are also interested. You're going to identify stakeholders, and you're beginning to develop a common understanding of the issue and engaging with those who are, to whom that issue is important, and kind of helping that issue to be important to others who might not have considered it. So you're building that community will to make a difference, to do something about it. Creating the conditions for success. This one is a little bit more fundamental in terms of developing an organization with leadership, with governance, financial and technical resources. Those are kind of, more nitpicky details, there's lots that can be learned about developing community-based organizations and things like that. I'm not going to go into detail with that. And then action, leadership, learning, and change, building on the smaller interventions that you have from earlier stages. You know, as your community organization grows, you're going to develop leadership. You're going to have to make formalized implementation of what your initiatives are. So figuring out how to raise awareness. And as you move forward, new leadership is going to come into the front, and you're going to figure out whether your issue has been addressed and you can kind of wind down your community effort, or whether this is something that's ongoing and where you need to kind of develop those formal pieces that people can kind of enter in and leave the organization, but the organization kind of stays on its own and is just renewed with different leadership. So his last broad area then speaks about using community conversations to gain a corner on the obvious, to kind of have that sense of what is it that I didn't know about? What is it that I need to know? Listening for engagement with the whole system, that we want to better understand what's going to motivate community members for action. So having those important conversations with so many people to help identify that issue and help them to kind of engage and be willing to kind of come on board with that. Understanding the system to see those entry points for change, so having a good sense of what the system is so that you can figure out, okay, what's our best method for coming in and making a change. And finding those words and concepts that motivate all. So making sure that this isn't just your issue, but that this is an issue that's something that's important for the whole community, and finding those words that resonate, that make sense to everybody. And then because you've built trust, you've had real engagement, you're going to have a vision that resonates with all, that you're able to move forward with. Okay. We've got a few minutes here, and I want to take some time for questions and conversation on this, and hear a little bit more about the kinds of things that you're doing. But I wanted to kind of make note again of that Shani Graham video that I sent the link out to. That was a video that that really, in my mind, built on those relationships, those conversations that people had together, and that opportunity to come together and figure out, well, what can we do together as a community? And they created something really vibrant there. I've got a link to a YouTube video, Richland Together, Let's Connect. And this is a real clear example of how asset-based community development can work. So I'd encourage you to go check out that link. And the other piece that I wanted to connect with you on, when we think about assets and the work that communities do, there's a project called the Halo Project, and I've got the link for that again as well. And that's a partnership between somebody who's done a lot of faith-based community development research and writing from the States, connected with somebody in Toronto, and they did some work to figure out what actually is the value of contributions that local congregations make to their community. And they found that for every $1 in programs that a congregation does, the city gets $4.77 worth of common good services. So to know that, yeah, it's, we know the importance of our contributions in terms of relationships and things like that, but there actually is a monetary value to that as well. Okay, let's, I think we've got about 15 minutes yet. Let's unmute for now and tell me what your thoughts are. What's coming together for you? So what are the...
Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
This reminds me a lot of community capacity building.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just an extension of it, or just a different look?
Well, asset-based community development is really kind of, yeah, it's one of those other ways of talking about it that is about community capacity building. Yeah. They're sometimes kind of one and the same, but. And
when we go farther back, it's all in the Bible, right?
Well, tell me what connections you're making there.
Well, of course, with the Pee Wee Bears, we have our community and family services. We do the OESP, LEAP, with all the energy and gas. One of the future things I'm working on is having an EVS presence here, doing some teaching and having a group that can respond to the community, for fires and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just different ideas. We have a lunch every Friday.
Mm-hmm.
We do a devotion there. We have thrift stores, so that's always a great way of getting stuff out is through the thrift stores.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been here 9 months, so I think we're okay.
Good. Yeah, how about others?
I have thoughts about gifts, and everyone has different gifts, and there's lots of people that have gifts that they can share with the community or within their church. But I think sometimes, I'm going to speak about myself, you wonder what good your gifts really are. Like my gifts are art and music and crafts and things like that, and I think, well, how is that really going to advance the kingdom? But it wasn't until I realized that you can use those gifts to have individual relationships with people. Because some people, even though they're involved in a group, you can still be very alone in the group. So I think it would be neat to share with volunteers or people that are wanting to volunteer that their gifts, even if it's knitting, are very important and can be used to create relationships.
Yeah.
That was kind of what I was thinking when you were talking about the gifts part.
So do others have thoughts that they would share with Laura when you've got yourself or others in your community who are kind of feeling like, well, my gift doesn't really matter? What do you say to your people in your community who have that kind of a feeling?
I think we need to encourage people that every gift is important, and that that there are ways of using those gifts. Maybe not this very minute, but often people have more than one gift.
Yeah.
And maybe if they're a great knitter, they also know how to bake a great cake. But they wouldn't even consider that as a gift, for instance.
Right.
And it's just, again, encouraging them around their gift, and also looking for opportunities for that person. So the person who knits, maybe there isn't anybody else in that congregation who knits, but places like third world countries or something, or Sick Kids Hospital can always use slippers or toques or whatever for newborns, and so that person could knit using their gift for a greater purpose.
And they might be
that would encourage others to think, oh, I'd like to learn how to knit so that I could do that as well.
Yes, that becomes the linchpin that starts it, right? Yeah. In our church, we have a group of women who knit or crochet, and they do prayer shawls for people who are going through tough times, and that can be a really good, such a beautiful visual piece and comforting piece for somebody who's struggling. Yeah. What else do you do in terms of creating that space for connection and conversation? So think not just about the services that you offer through your core there, but what do you do and what can you do to help people to connect with each other? What do you think?
I think we're in a little bit of a unique situation here in Belleville at our Family Services office, because we have a meal program at noontime 4 days a week. And pretty much every day the same people are coming to access that. And then through the winter months, we also run an evening meal program 7 days a week, and the same people will come again. And then we have our food bank. And so we're having the same people accessing multiple services, and they are building community among themselves where their lives may not intersect outside of these walls. They intersect here on an almost daily basis. And so they, you know, they do hear what we do at church. They sit in the same seats and they talk to the same people, and they build their community here. And we often hear about, through one client, an issue that has arisen for another client. And so we're able even to start putting supports in place for them before they themselves come through the door and ask for help.
That's great. That's great. And do you have stories as well of people who are able to help each other?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
That happens. Just on Friday, we had two of our regulars connect over. One needed someone to help him move a particular piece of furniture from point A to point B, connected with another regular client who was willing to give the muscle to help that to happen. All the time we'll have clients bringing other people to us saying, you know, oh, you need food, come see this person here at the Salvation Army and she'll look after you, that kind of thing. And we even now, when I started here about coming up on 5 years ago, we were a secure access building, and so the doors were open only during program hours.
Oh, yeah.
But now we put coffee on at 10 o'clock and the doors don't close then until the end of the day. And our clients can come in at any time and connect with someone who can help them.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting too to think about, you know, what you said there about the doors being open and coffee being on. At my congregation in downtown core area, Winnipeg, we have a lot of homeless people that are in our neighborhood. And on Sunday mornings, we open our doors and we have Sunday school for whoever wants to attend. But we also have, it was originally called a third usher group, because we found that the ushers who take care of kind of bringing people into the congregation on Sunday morning were being tapped by people who are coming in from the community, asking for money, asking for food, things like that. And so we created a third usher group to kind of attend to those needs. And we developed, it's eventually kind of moved into what we now call the coffee and conversation group. And so we have food downstairs, coffee's on, tea's on, and we have a number of community members who come in and sit downstairs with us, and we have conversations. And it's not necessarily, it's definitely not about doing social work with them. It's about building up conversations. And sometimes we're able to do identifying some needs and kind of addressing those, but really it's about building relationship. That's kind of the important piece of what we do there. And so many of those people actually do consider this their church, regardless of whether they actually come upstairs on Sunday morning and sit through the worship service with us. That time that they have together around that table, you know, chatting with other members of our congregation, that's church for them, that's community for them, and that's important. Yeah, other thoughts? I've got a chat here from, as Canadians, we always downplay our abilities. You know, we say, I'm sorry, that kind of thing, but when team wins, our country stands up, and the idea may be to understand that we all play for Canada. Yeah, and that's an important piece to think about. You know, what is our community? You know, we are the North End. We are, you know, whatever community it is, and that's important. And I've got Courtney from Kentville. About 2 years ago, we started a Moms and Tots program here in Kentville. Originally, we'd planned to have the moms have their own time, but it's evolved into a group where moms can share their struggles and experiences. Last summer, one of the moms had an adult daughter pass away, and the Moms and Tots group was able to be that support to her through food, through being present at the viewing and the funeral. And it's a lovely community of moms and tots who look forward to Thursdays as a day to be with friends and that sharing of food and friendship together. Yeah, that's a great one. Any other thoughts? We've got about 2 or 3 minutes yet before we have to go. Are there other things that you're thinking about, that this conversation together has kind of brought to you, questions that you might have?
I wanted to share about what Lori jogged when she was saying, well, this is all in the Bible. And so I read some N.T. Wright, The New Testament and the People of God. And one of the things he covers in that book is that these associations or communities are built by common aims, beliefs, symbols, rituals, and practices. And so I think from that, the role of our Sunday gathering or any meeting during the week where we celebrate what is happening in our community.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is the power of testimony and the invitation for people to hear each other's stories in that setting, and for them to share where people are known, and we celebrate publicly what's happening along with the songs, the celebration that really formalizes this community and says we're in it together, we're in it with God. And that's where I've seen really powerful transformation, and also a way where people are knit together in a larger group. So I wanted to thank Lori for jogging that.
Yeah, amen. That's great. And I think that that's something that the Salvation Army does much better than many other congregations do. Like often you'll have a congregation that is just, people drive their cars in from whatever suburb they're in and go to church and then leave and don't have anything to do with the communities that they find themselves in. And I know that the Salvation Army is that that congregation as well as that community work all together in one, and to provide that space for people to come together to worship God and to care for each other, to share with each other, and to be that voice in the community and with the community to move forward and to identify things that you can work on together to make it a great place to live and be with each other. Okay, we are at 11:58, I think, and winding down to the end. Peter, I don't know whether you have more that needs to be done here. I don't know if your audio is working yet or not.
Well,
Yeah? Okay.
Well, it might work for a while. Shirley had a comment when I just I want to encourage her to share that with everyone. So Shirley, come on board. Oh, no sound, Shirley.
Not there?
No microphone. So let me go to the chat and I'll share it. She just said they have a mental health group with a lunch provided, and sessions by staff and a community mental health worker have made some great community building in that group. So she's over in Hamilton, if I remember right. And there's a great opportunity where workers and a meal coming together create community. So thank you, Shirley. I see. Yeah. I want to, just encourage folks to deep dive into this a bit, play with it. I think, Pewita, your idea for your students of writing out their gifts and creating a helper learning board is a practical thing we could walk away with today. Not even just with the folks within our building, so to speak, of our staff, our volunteers, but even with the folks that come in our door. After I read McKnight's book on asset building community development, I started playing with our intake forum. And what I did was I posed a question there. I just asked people to think of a way that they might have a skill or an ability, a talent, a gift that they might be able to offer others. And how I explained that was that our food bank had just provided some assistance, and it really wasn't the Salvation Army, it was the community who had just responded. We are the hands and feet of the community, providing the food to them that day. And maybe there was a way that they could give back to the community. And what might that look like? And so I started playing with that. And most of the responses, as you know, in a food bank would be the client might offer, I can volunteer in the food bank. Which, is great, but I knew I was starting to get somewhere when one of the clients mentioned to me, he said to me, I used to cut the hair of the homeless out in Vancouver. I could do that. And I realized that because the real part of this is not just about looking at the assets that people have, but also the needs within our community and developing those conversations. And so folks, don't look at this as a theoretical model, but this is something that we can really start to play with like Play-Doh and really have some fun with. It's amazing when you start creating these opportunities for these conversations and what actually shows up in your door. It'll
Yeah.
blow you away. I was reminding Abby about some of the stories she shared with me. And if you want to hear some other creativity, email Abby over in Belleville.
Mm-hmm.
She'll give you some. As we close, are there any questions first?
No, good.
All righty. Let me remind you a couple things. Hopefully you're all connected to your coach. You hopefully had a coaching session, and if you haven't or you are unsure about that, please email me. I trust that it is a wonderful experience. That's one of the bonuses of this cohort, is your ability to connect with a personal coach and really dive into some of this. The other one is our Facebook group. Haven't seen a lot. I've got a couple of likes, but just encourage you to really start to play in there. This is your group. It is not a kind of read and just walk away. I really want to encourage you to use it as an area where we can really wrestle through some of this. Post some crazy stuff, folks. Let's wrestle through this. This is a fun issue, but all we do is just sort of participate and take it away as head knowledge, we've only done half the job. And I just want to encourage you to not only read, but engage with us as well. Got a chat here from Jonathan. Jonathan says he's seen normally a frame in our introduction on negatives and needs-based. And I've observed a procedure concerned with the system and protecting our assets by making people prove that they need prove that they need the food and vouchers we provide. How could our relationships and centers look different if we frame so much like you have just illustrated? I got to tell you, Jonathan, that's where our heart is right now, and I can see Debbie nodding her head there. What if we stopped having 10-minute interviews? What if people didn't have to prove anything to us, but we actually listened and came alongside? What if we actually had engagement? What if we ministered? What if we created an atmosphere so unlike what we have right now, which is what I'm actually calling a drive-through service? We actually, people come in, we give them 10 minutes, and we, wish them well as we give them some food and, move them along our chain. What if we could do it differently? Is there a paradigm that we could shift to? And I mean, that's a big dream I have of saying, what would it look like if it wasn't about time and the numbers of people we're trying to, but actually about the quality and the relationship we build? I leave you with that today, folks. I want to thank Buida for her ministry to us today. I really appreciate this. It is meat and potatoes, as I used to say out home. This is rock solid stuff, and I really encourage you to dive into it, wrestle with it, engage me on it. I dare you, or we dare you. And this is just lesson 2. We got some really neat stuff coming next week or next session and the session following. So with that, I point you back to your coaches, our Facebook group, back to the reading, and engage us. Let's have some fun with this. Anything else before I wish you well and bless you?
Thanks for letting me be a part of it. I know that you've got some good stuff coming up, and if I can, I may try and kind of pop in on some of that conversation, but it's been great getting to know you guys a little bit, and feel free to email me if you've got other questions too.
There you go. You've heard it. She said email her. Stay in contact.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And as we leave today, let me just pray and give a blessing to this. Father God, we thank you for the ability to just connect and create our own group and community here. We thank you for the opportunity to wrestle with not only the readings, but how you call us out into community, that your son Jesus moved into our community and transformed it and transformed us. So Father, as we now leave, would you just encourage us, bless us, and send us out? I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I just have one last one. Shirley's just offered that they are moving to a case management to spend more time with their clients. Awesome. I want to encourage us all to look at transformational, holistic, I don't even like management, ministry. Let's go out and minister in Jesus' name. Amen. Bless you all, and we'll see you in a month.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.